Well, the stage is set for the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City, and we've got you covered here on Mountaineer Moment, talking all things Big 12 tournament, not just the Mountaineers, but a full-on preview of all the teams, matchups, Darkhorse candidates, West Virginia's road, if it goes anywhere. We'll talk about it here on Mountaineer Moment. Stick around for this episode 163. This is the Mountaineer Moment, your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. From pregame to postgame coverage and breaking news, we've got you covered. Let's go. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Mountaineer Moment. My name's Troy, and this is your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. And, in this case, all things Big 12 basketball. Talking about the men's conference tournament that is set to begin on Tuesday, March 10th, with 4 matchups and then more action to come throughout the week until we have a winner crowned on Saturday. And so we're gonna have you covered here before the action tips off in Kansas City on that fancy-looking glass LED court. We'll talk about just a preview of some of these early matchups, some potential matchups that will come, some Darkhorse candidates in this, and then as this is a show specific to West Virginia, we'll talk about their potential matchups and what they might need or will need. Do they need to win the whole thing? Do they need to cut down the nets to get to March Madness? What are they looking like at this point? Bubble considerations. Is there really a bubble conversation going on in the Big 12 right now? I've said for a little bit here on Mountaineer Moment there doesn't seem to be, although there was a few weeks ago. We'll talk about that and the stakes that exist there in this bubble conversation. So, again, Mountaineer Moment, but not just West Virginia. If you're here, watching as just part of your Big 12 preview, stick around because we'll talk about your team on this episode as well. But hit that subscribe button for us. Help me, help you. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. Just hit the 500 subscriber mark on YouTube. Super thankful for that. Super grateful that you're here right now, still listening, still watching, and still help growing this Mountaineer Moment community. So we'll start with just big picture, 30,000-foot view of this thing, man. The stage is set for the Big 12 Conference Tournament. Real quick, we'll go through the seeds and matchups and what the action is going to look like starting on Tuesday, because the only guaranteed matchups that we have are on Tuesday in this thing, and then the rest is going to depend on who sticks around and who has a short trip to Kansas City. So obviously Arizona, incredible season for them. I think the most wins they've had in a regular season for the 1 seed Arizona Wildcats, who get a double bye. So the top 4 in the conference get a double bye, meaning they don't play until Thursday, the 12th. They're followed by Houston, the number 2 seed. Obviously a threat every single year are the Houston Cougars. I don't want to call it like a down year because they're going to be a 2 seed in the big dance here in a week. But they lost a few games this year, right? So Houston, number 2 in the standings, 14-4 in conference, 26-5, and really, really good team, really impressive NBA draft prospects and all that too. So they're the 2 seed. The number 3 seed ends up being the Kansas Jayhawks at 12-6 in conference. Although there was a logjam of teams at 12-6, Iowa State, Kansas, and Texas Tech. Well, Kansas ends up as the 3 seed, Texas Tech the 4, and the odd man out in that scenario, again, because only 4 teams can get a double bye, 12-6 Iowa State Cyclones will be playing on Wednesday in the first matchup of the day. 6 seed TCU, who obviously came on real strong at the end of the season. They are a lock to make the tournament. They beat the aforementioned Iowa State Cyclones in a big upset that put them really, really in the bubble, and then not long after, really, really in the tournament field as they finished the season 21-10 and 11-7 in conference play. Jamie Dixon has TCU really playing some good basketball right now. The 7 seed is your West Virginia Mountaineers, who again are part of these, another logjam of teams who finished 9-9. BYU, UCF, West Virginia, Cincinnati. Well, West Virginia did some good things against all of those teams, swept UCF and Cincinnati and beat BYU. So they were 5-0 against these teams that were also 500 in conference. So West Virginia gets a 7 seed. The 8 seed is who we just mentioned in that logjam of teams. The UCF Knights, solid season, overperforming for Dawkins and his crew from where they were projected in the Big 12 preseason poll. They were 15 or 16, I think, in that. And to finish the season 8, and they're close to a lock, I guess, for the NCAA tournament. Should they lose that next matchup, which will either be against Cincinnati or Utah, could kind of make things interesting, I guess. I saw Lenardi has them as like part of the last 4 buys of his latest mix, but they're coming in losing 3 straight, and so just something to look for potentially, whether or not they could find themselves on the outside looking in. They would like to think, I would probably like to think too, that they've done enough to get in regardless of what they do in Kansas City. All right, so that's all the teams with a bye or a double bye. And now moving on, the 9-seeded Cincinnati Bearcats came on strong to end the season. Finished 17-14, 9-9 in conference. They're going to play the Utah Utes, a team that West Virginia lost to, 10-21, 2-16. Utah, that's West Virginia's their last win. They haven't done much before or after besides beating the Mountaineers. So that's the 9 versus 16 game. That'll tip off at 3 o'clock on Tuesday. The 10-seeded, the last 9-9 team here, is the BYU Cougars, coming off a big win on Saturday night at home against Texas Tech. They got the 15th seed Kansas State Wildcats at 3-15 in conference. Then you got the 12 seed Arizona State Sun Devils against the 13 Baylor Bears. That'll tip things off, the first game on Tuesday at 12:30 Eastern Time, 11:30 Central. And then the last but not least matchup, 11th seed Colorado, 17-14 overall, 7-11 in conference, and the 14th seed Oklahoma State Cowboys, 18-13 and 6-12 in Big 12 play. That'll be the last game on Tuesday. Winner of that one gets TCU. West Virginia gets the winner of BYU Kansas State. Mentioned UCF gets the winner of Utah Cincinnati, and then Iowa State gets the winner of Arizona State and Baylor. So the stage is set, and we'll kind of go through this thing at a few different angles. I'm going to give you some intriguing matchups to watch for, potentially in later rounds, and then, something I see in the first round as an intriguing matchup, and then a dark horse candidate that I have that maybe not many do in this thing, and a dark horse that I would classify that as, a team who could make a run that has to start this thing on Tuesday. So one of those 8 teams in the bottom half of the Big 12 that do not get a bye, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll get West Virginia specific toward the end of the episode. But again, those 4 matchups on Tuesday, obviously an intriguing matchup as a Mountaineer fan is the matchup between BYU and Kansas State, 10 versus 15. West Virginia split with K-State, most recent, their loss on the road to K-State without PJ Haggerty, and then the 10th seed BYU Cougars without Richie Saunders with his ACL injury, a couple weeks ago. But AJ DeBonsa, Rob Wright, great talent on that team. Winner gets the Mountaineers, so that's obviously a matchup to keep an eye on. BYU, not that they were reeling, I guess you could say a little bit, not that they were going to fall toward the bubble and off, but that win against Texas Tech for them really, they needed that. They needed it, one, to get to 500 in conference play, and to overall, be able to collect their 21st win on the season against, a top 15 team in the country. So they needed that, and they got it. The team that I see, and I'll get right to my dark horse right here, or the game that I see, the team that I see that intrigues me the most, honestly, is the Baylor Bears. Of one of these 8 teams playing on the first day, Baylor, man, watch out. Obviously, they're in need of a conference tournament win, to win every game. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday to go and win 5 straight. Now, that's easier said than done. Do I think they're going to do that? Absolutely not. But if there were a team that I would say is a dark horse candidate to win this whole thing, I would say Baylor. They haven't been able to put it together, man, this year. Obviously, 6-12 in conference. They've won 2 of their last 3 though, including a win against UCF and Utah, and lost to Houston by 13 in a game they were in for a little bit, really, a lot of bit. That got away from them in the end. Just a 7-point loss to Arizona a couple weeks ago. Close losses to Iowa State and BYU. Close loss to TCU a while back. This is a Baylor team that can really score the basketball. Cameron Carr and Obi Agbem, 2 guys that can really, really do some really good things on the offensive end, especially. Cam Carr averaging 19 points. Tonde Yesufu averaging 18 himself, and then Agbem and Isaac Williams averaging about 10 apiece too. So this is a team that can score the basketball. And again, they've been in games, been there, done that with some really, really good teams this year. And we're on the losing end more than they would have liked to be in Big 12 play, which is why they find themselves playing on Tuesday and why they find themselves on the outside looking in and in desperate need of not just a long run, but a Big 12 tournament win, like the whole thing, championship, in order to make the big dance. But I think if there was one team, man, that I could see kind of piecing it all together, because we haven't seen a Baylor team that's done that this year, but if they do, well, watch out. If they do, again, a 3-point loss on the road to Iowa State, close loss against BYU, 7-point loss to Arizona, a game they were in just last week against Houston on the road, right? This is a team with more talent than what their record shows at 16-15, 6-12. So keep an eye on the Baylor Bears. Again, they're going up against Arizona State, who kind of, I think, is like a sneaky 7-11. I don't know about you, but they've won 2 of their last 3, including a win over Kansas. They have a win over Texas Tech. They have a close loss to Arizona. So this is a team that's kind of sneaky. That West Virginia, I think, played at the right time, maybe early on in conference play when they were really struggling. But they've since come on a little bit. Again, beat Texas Tech, beat Kansas, and coming fresh off a loss to Iowa State. But that's going to be the game that tips things off in Kansas City, 12:30 Eastern. Baylor and Arizona State. And I think both of those teams are capable of knocking off the Cyclones in the next matchup, and then so on and so forth. They'd have Texas Tech from there. Tough route for any of these teams. Big 12, one of the best conferences in the country, certainly. And some people, make the joke that it's harder to win the Big 12 tournament than it is to win the NCAA tournament. And for some of these teams that got to play 5 games, there could certainly be some truth to that. So that's a good matchup to watch. Again, the second matchup, Utah-Cincinnati. Cincinnati's a team, in that bubble conversation, but not really. I mentioned it a moment ago, like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we were talking bubble, we were talking TCU, we were talking UCF, we were talking West Virginia, we were talking Oklahoma State 3 weeks ago. Since then, TCU has played themselves into the tournament. UCF has been reeling, but probably has done enough to get into the NCAA tournament. West Virginia played themselves out of the NCAA tournament and bubble conversation for the most part, hanging on by a thread, and it's a really, really small thread, right? Like you're barely hanging on. And then Cincinnati's a team that has played themselves into that conversation, right? After West Virginia beat them a while ago, they reeled off 4 straight wins, UCF, K-State, Utah, and Kansas. Lost to Texas Tech, then won 2 more, and ended the season on the road at TCU with a loss that hurt them as far as that tournament conversation. Put them at 500, had an opportunity to finish the season above, over 500 in conference play, but couldn't do it, and they sit at 17-14 and 9-9. Now, obviously, you lose round 1 to Utah, you're out of that conversation for sure, but you beat Utah. Then you get another win under your belt, and where things are currently sitting, I'm going to pull up Lunardi, not that he's everything, as we know. But his kind of take with Cincinnati, he has them in the next 4 out at this point, and, barring drastic things that would influence that, just treating Cincinnati as Cincinnati on its own, I'd have a hard time thinking that a win over Utah and then a loss to UCF would put them in the dance. Now, win over Utah, win over UCF, do they make this argument that now Cincinnati belongs in and UCF doesn't? UCF's reeling, Cincinnati's hot. We've seen that before. So that could happen. That could play a role. And then the winner of that game would the winner of that game, if Cincinnati take care of business against Utah, winner between them and UCF gets Arizona, the number 1 seed. Now, is that going to be a bad loss when you lose that game? Absolutely not. But is that a game Cincinnati would have to win? I don't know. Is it a game UCF would have to win? I don't think so. I think with UCF appearing to be on the right side of the bubble right now, he has, Lunardi has UCF as part of the last 4 byes. So they're the 5th team away from the bubble at this moment, according to Joe Lunardi, who again doesn't know everything, but that's just his take on it. They beat Cincinnati, get to Arizona and lose that game. I think we'll certainly see UCF in the field. Could they be sweating a little bit if Cincinnati beats them? Absolutely. So that's what's at stake in that section of the bracket, the top half of the bracket. Arizona's going to be a 1 seed. Texas Tech, no JT Toffman, but they get the double bye. If things go chalk, they would meet in the semifinals on Friday. So there's the top half of the bracket and a few things that jump off the page there. Number 1, Baylor would be my dark horse, certainly in that half of the bracket. But the potential matchup to watch would be Cincinnati and UCF, for the sole reason that's, Joe Lunardi has them in that bubble conversation. There's not like a true, like, this team is on the bubble, here's exactly what they need kind of thing in this Big 12 field, and that's the first year I can remember that in, some time. But, a 9-8 matchup with an 8 that's reeling and on the right side of the bubble right now, and a 9 that is streaking, and they play each other. 9's, Cincinnati's the 9, and they beat the 8, who's struggling. Could Cincinnati take the bid away from UCF by beating them? Certainly a possibility. Certainly something to watch out for, according to Lunardi. And again, we thought UCF was safe. I did too. I still would kind of lean that way, but certainly an interesting thing to look for there. All right, second half of the bracket. Again, Kansas State and BYU are the first game of that second session on Tuesday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time. They'll tip things off, these two teams. PJ Haggerty, not sure if he'll be a go in that game. Obviously, we know he did not play against West Virginia, and then they got 104 put on them by Kansas, and he did play in that game. 21 points, 5 boards for him. Nate Johnson had 21. Kamari McGriff had 17, so they had that going for them, but they just gave up too many points to Kansas, who shot 59% from the floor, led by Trey White with 23 in that one. So this matchup, BYU, you would expect them to move on and face West Virginia, but who knows? I mean, Kansas State just rattled off some things there. Sour taste in their mouth falling to their rival Kansas, but they are coming off a win before that against West Virginia. So, yeah, and BYU appearing to be safely in the field, certainly now with 21 wins and a big one coming over Texas Tech. But keep an eye on that game and who West Virginia is going to face. West Virginia has beaten both those teams, but they lost to Kansas State. Beat by BYU not that long ago at home. West Virginia had good offense that game, and that's not always the case if you follow the Mountaineers. So just an interesting note there. I'd say the game I'm least, sorry if you're a fan of these teams, least kind of going to have my eye on is this Oklahoma State and Colorado matchup, the 14-11 set to play TCU, the 6th seed. I don't know. I mean, Oklahoma State was surging for a little bit in that conversation, then played themselves out, kind of like West Virginia did. And Colorado, I think I mentioned, I mean, that's kind of like Arizona State to me, Arizona State and Colorado, finished ahead the likes of Baylor and Oklahoma State and Kansas State in, the Big 12 standings. And you might not have had that in your preseason predictions, but they did. And so, I don't have a ton to say. 7-11 record for Colorado ain't too shabby. So keep an eye on them. They were the 16 seed last year, 11 seed this year. Set to play TCU in the second round. TCU is playing really, really, really well as of late, and so I would expect them to prevail in that game, setting up a Thursday matchup with Kansas, which will be the last game of the day on Thursday. 6 seed versus 3 seed, potentially, should TCU take care of business, and I don't see why not. Since they lost to UCF on the road, they have reeled off 5 straight, including a win over Texas Tech, Cincinnati, and West Virginia to get that streak started. So TCU obviously has played themselves into the tournament. 21 wins, 11-7 record in conference play. Heck of a year, heck of a second half of the season that they've put together in the Big 12. Again, the teams with double byes on that half of the bracket are the Utah Utes and Kansas Jayhawks. West Virginia, BYU, K-State looking for a date with Houston on Thursday. Houston, the 2 seed. And, as far as, bubble talk and this and that kind of conversation in this half of the bracket, we very well might see a semifinal of Houston and Kansas. Again, TCU's red hot, so don't count them out either. But, Houston's firmly in the field, obviously, is probably going to be a 2 seed. Kansas could be a 3 seed, 4 seed. TCU continuing to trend upward. Who knows where they'll be seed line, depending on what they do in Kansas City. BYU in the field, though they're playing on the first day, but they're going to make the tournament. What seed line? I don't know. Depends what they do in Kansas City, of course, as well. But then you have, you'll see why I'm trending toward this. Then you got an 11 seed, 14 seed, and 15 seed in Colorado, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State, who aren't in the conversation, at all. All 3 of those teams, three of this bottom half of the bracket, 3 of the 8 teams must win the Big 12 tournament if they want to make the tournament, the March Madness field. In the top half of the bracket, I would say same case. 3 of the teams have to win the Big 12 tournament. Baylor, Arizona State, and Utah. We mentioned Cincinnati. Does not necessarily have to do that, though they need to string some wins together for sure. How many, we don't know. They are in a similar position as West Virginia, though most people have them in a better position at this moment, despite West Virginia sweeping Cincinnati. That's a conversation maybe for another day. Maybe next Selection Sunday, depending on where these teams lie. But so there's 6 teams in the 16-team tournament field that need to cut down the nets in order to, get that automatic bid. But in the bottom half, there's 3. Then there's 4 teams that are 4 teams that are firmly in. And then there's West Virginia, which is unique to the bottom half of the bracket, because the top half of the bracket, you have Arizona, Texas Tech, Iowa State firmly in. You have UCF, who's trending toward being in. You have Cincinnati, who's got some work to do. Then you got those other 3 that I mentioned. But in the bottom half, you have 4 teams that are in. Houston, Kansas, TCU, BYU. You have 3 teams that are out. Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Colorado. Then you have the mighty Mountaineers. So in their half of the bracket, they are the only team who, and I guess I could be wrong, and we might not find out, obviously, but I could be wrong in saying that the Mountaineers don't have to win the Big 12 tournament to reach the March Madness field. Could be wrong about that. Absolutely. And again, we might not find that out. But West Virginia, again, in that half, they seem to be in a category of their own, which is interesting because, again, a potential, and this is where we get to West Virginia specific, and then I'll give you a few more Big 12 broad things that we'll get into, and then that'll be the end of the episode. But West Virginia's Wednesday night matchup is going to come against a potential NCAA tournament team in BYU. Then you're going to play all tournament teams, most likely. So you could play, depending on how long you go, right? You might be very short-lived. You might play Wednesday and get bounced and head home. But you could play BYU on Wednesday. You would play Houston on Thursday night. And it just kind of sounds silly to say, but you get past Houston. Then you got a potential matchup with TCU or Kansas, and then who knows who you get in the top half of the bracket. Iowa State, Texas Tech, Arizona, Baylor, like I mentioned, I don't know. But just kind of an interesting point. If there's a team in the bottom half of the bracket, now hopefully this is West Virginia Motivation 101. If there's a team in the bottom half of the bracket that's like, we have to prove something in this tournament that might not require us to win the whole thing. If there's a team in this field that describes, it's West Virginia. If there's a team in the top half of the bracket that describes, it's Cincinnati to stay hot as they've been. And that's it. So, and UCF, hoping to keep their seat at the table versus getting knocked out because of being so cold down the stretch of the season. But if you look in the context of the Big 12, and West Virginia sitting at 18-13, 9-9 in conference play, and to be on the right side of the bubble, in this conversation, and I get that there's net rankings and strength of schedule and strength of record and quad victories, and we'll actually get to that. It reminds me, we'll get to that in a moment to compare West Virginia to some of these teams. Just on the outside looking in at the NCAA tournament at this moment, according to the experts. But about a week ago, right, it seemed as if the magic number Big 12-wise, just in the win column for whatever reason, was 20 wins, right? Again, we think UCF's going to be in. They got 20 wins. They're 9-9. TCU eclipsed that number a while ago, right? They got to 21 wins on the season, 11-7 in conference. They're absolutely positively in. BYU picked up win number 21 against Texas Tech, though they've been struggling lately. That 21st win was big because if they would have lost to K-State, who knows? Who knows? We saw crazy things happen last year in the Big 12 as far as teams that we thought were going to get in, didn't get in, West Virginia. So who knows? Cincinnati, 17-14, 9-9, and 17 wins is not 20 wins. West Virginia is at 18. That's not 20 wins. Now, I don't know that it's a bad thing for West Virginia that Cincinnati, UCF, like one of those teams is getting in, at least one of them. And I say that because, well, I don't know. I would have to think one of those teams is getting in. UCF could lose to Cincinnati in their first game in the Big 12 tournament and still get in. Cincinnati, if they beat UCF, that would be 2 more wins to their resume, with a win over Utah and a win over UCF, and then a matchup with Arizona that's not going to count against them, but would obviously put them in if they won that game. That would give them 19 wins should they lose to Arizona. West Virginia, again, win numbers, all of this stuff. I get that it's kind of basic, but West Virginia plays BYU, plays Houston. You beat 2 tournament teams in that regard, and it's way easier said than done. BYU's going to be tough in and of itself because of the talent that they have. Houston, don't even get me started. But should you somehow do that, here's the way I'll say it. West Virginia and Cincinnati have the same conference record. West Virginia has beaten Cincinnati twice. Cincinnati, should both of these teams somehow, some way win 2 games, okay? Keep tracking with me. Should they win 2 games, Cincinnati would have beaten, it's a fact, right, because we know their matchups, Cincinnati would have beaten Utah and UCF. A bad team and a team that's trending downward. That's who Cincinnati would beat before falling to Arizona. That would put them with 19 total wins. That would put them with 11 conference wins, counting these, and 10 conference losses, so over 500. West Virginia, should they win 2 games, one would be very impressive, beating BYU, and the other would be borderline miraculous, beating Houston. Should you win 2 games and then fall to Kansas, let's say, West Virginia's 2 wins undoubtedly, or should the first one come against BYU, are obvious. I mean, that's a much better conference tournament showing and resume building performance than Cincinnati can put forth at this point. Utah and UCF or BYU and Houston, right? I'd rather beat BYU and Houston because Houston's one of the best teams in the country. BYU has the best player in the country, right? There's reasons for saying that. And so if those things happen, independent of every other bubble conversation and bid stealers and everything else out there, but in my opinion, I'm not a bracketologist nor the son of a bracketologist, but in my opinion, with West Virginia winning the head-to-head, with West Virginia then having more total wins and the same amount of conference wins, and sweeping Cincinnati and coming to the Big 12 tournament and beating Houston and BYU, 2 tournament teams, before falling to, a Kansas who's really, really good too. If you're going to put one of those 2 teams in, and they might at that point still say we're not going to put either of these teams in, but if you're going to put Cincinnati or West Virginia in, I would put West Virginia in. I get that I'm wearing the logo on what I got on right now, but man, oh man, I'm just saying, that's what I would do. That's what I would want, but it's also what I would do based on their resumes too. So, yeah, I get Cincinnati's been coming on, and I'm going to break down a few numbers here right now. I did expect to do this, but if you look at Lenardi, I think it was earlier, over the weekend, Sunday, Lenardi posted, his update. Last 4 teams in, first 4 teams out, next 4 teams out. His next 4 teams out included Cincinnati, included San Diego State, included Oklahoma and Cal. And I found online a column that breaks all these things down. I might, if I remember, I'll put it on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, might not remember, so no promises. But if you look at it, here, the net rankings of these teams real quick. Cincinnati, 47. San Diego State, 48. Oklahoma, 55. California, 65, West Virginia, 58. Ken Palm, Cincinnati, San Diego State, and Oklahoma are all in the 40s. West Virginia is 58. Cal is 70. BPI, Cal is worse than all of them considerably. Quad 1 wins, right? West Virginia, best winning percentage there. Well, Cal is 4-6, so that's better, but 5-7 West Virginia, 4-9 Oklahoma, 2-7 San Diego State, 3-11 Cincinnati. Oklahoma's 5-5 in Quad 2. West Virginia's 3-5 in Quad 2. Quad 3 and 4. West Virginia's got 1 combined loss. Cal's got 1 loss. San Diego State 1 loss. Cincinnati 1 loss. And so, even as detrimental that losses against that West Virginia had that we were upset about, Utah, Kansas State, Baylor, Xavier, Wake Forest, right? Teams that aren't in the tournament. Obviously, a lot of those were Quad 2. I guess the Quad 3 would be Utah at home. because West Virginia's 8-0 in Quad 4, 2-1 in Quad 3, 3-5 in Quad 2. And fortunate that that's the case. And so when you compare it, I mean, they're kind of right there. Net ranking might be a little lower and those kind of things, but no one's sitting here saying that West Virginia, can just win one game and then lose to Houston and then, they're still going to get in. Like, they're not going to get in with that, right? You have to, the stage is set. We said it at the beginning. The stage is set. Your second matchup, third round game is going to be, if you win your first game, is going to be against Houston. You want to make the dance with the big boys, you got to beat the big boys. And so this is an opportunity that West Virginia is going to have against one of the premier teams in the nation, national runner-up last season, Big 12 dominating over the last few years, Houston Cougars, and you got to go beat them. But first standing in your way is going to be BYU or K-State. So don't want to get super, super far ahead of ourselves, but, as far as just West Virginia's potential road and what I think they'll need, all of these things, well, I just gave you one scenario. Should Cincinnati and West Virginia both win 2 games, and you're just like, well, we're going to put one of them in. Not that it's even going to get to that point, but if you're going to put one of them in at that point, put West Virginia in, would be my thought. Head-to-head, beat them twice, period. Now, do I think West Virginia could beat I've seen everything. Everybody's got an opinion. How many wins does West Virginia need? 2 wins, 3 wins, 4 wins? Do they need to win that whole tournament with 4 wins? Some people would say yes. I don't think it's 4. Again, this is super hypothetical. We might not even get to that point because they might get bounced on Tuesday, right? But to me, you beat BYU, you beat Houston, and you beat a TCU or a Kansas to get to the Big 12 title game and fall to Arizona, that team deserves serious consideration for the NCAA tournament. Winning 3 games gets you to 21 total wins. A lot can happen over the course of 3 days, and West Virginia has an opportunity to make a lot happen, to go from, really distant outside looking in to in the thick of that conversation, but you got to win games to get there. Some people are of the belief that West Virginia might only need 2 wins. Well, you beat BYU, you beat Houston, you fall to Kansas. Is that enough? I'd certainly be sweating, and I'd certainly at this moment, my gut would tell me, no, that's not enough. Unfortunately. But I don't think you need to win the whole thing. 3 wins, as miraculous as that would be, I think it might just be enough. Again, am I fully confident that we're going to do that? No, absolutely not. Can it happen? Have we seen stranger things happen? Yeah, I guess so. So that's all I'm going to say on that. But Big 12 tournament, again, as we round out this episode, kind of just a different episode, just give my thoughts as I gloss over the bracket and give my 2 cents everywhere. Man, what a field. And what an opportunity. Shout out to the West Virginia women for their Big 12 tournament championship, sealed on Sunday evening against TCU, winning the Big 12 title. That's pretty awesome for West Virginia, who's going to be hosting first couple rounds, of the ladies tournament. So shout out to them. And yeah, it all starts on Tuesday. I will say for those that are still watching, still here, still listening, West Virginia wise, Kansas State and BYU, play on Tuesday night, and Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, there will be a new episode of Mountaineer Moment, giving you a game preview specific, not hypothetical anymore, specific to who West Virginia is going to be playing and keys to victory and what the West Virginia team needs to do to keep marching on. And we'll have that covered as long as they keep going, right? So you do that, then we'll preview a matchup with Houston, then we'll preview, and so on and so forth. But we'll give you a post-game reaction and analysis to every West Virginia game, just like we've done all season long. So continue to be here, subscribe to Mountaineer Moment, join this community, and man, let's go make a run in Kansas City. You want to make March Madness? Well, make a run in Kansas City, and West Virginia needs to do just that. Is it 2 wins? Is it 3 wins? Is it 4 wins? I don't know. But the more wins you got, the better chance you got to get in. So that is what I do know. So we'll see what happens. But Big 12 men's basketball tournament, Phillips 66 on the glass floor. Should be interesting. Tipping off Tuesday, and we'll have you covered here on Mountaineer Moment as we continue through this week. College basketball, man, this is peak March with the conference tournament, and March Madness tipping off next week after. So it's going to be good. We're going to have you covered here on Mountaineer Moment, so stick around, and we'll see you next time. Let's go Mountaineers.